Are you a fan of the finer things in life? Well, of course you are. You're listening to my voice right now. I have some good news for you. If you're a fan of high-class, delicious Italian coffee, I have a promo code for you. If you check out Lorenzotti Coffee at lorenzotti.coffee and use the promo code The Mad Ones, you can get 10% off their fantastic beans. So join us, lorenzotti.coffee, promo code The Mad Ones. You are watching an MLGA Network live broadcast. The only people for me are the Mad Ones.
The world is filled with the boring and the barely conscious.
The misery loves company.
But we don't have to live this way.
Jessica and I are here to talk to those the system rejects, to radicals and thought criminals.
The ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but push the boundaries of acceptable discourse.
Those who stare reality in the face and dare it to be different.
History isn't made by the timid, and fun is not had by the perpetually afraid.
We are the Mad Ones.
So let's get to it.
Welcome to the Mad Ones. I'm your manic Viking dream host, Cam Harless, and with me, as always, is your depressive feral housewife, nightmare hostess, Miss Jessica Green. How are you doing, Jessica?
Just wonderful. Thank you for that intro. Did you say nightmare queen?
No, I said nightmare hostess, but yeah, I think
I just made it. I made hostess into queen.
You made it that much better. Yeah.
I promoted myself.
But tonight we are joined by a bean roaster, cage-free lifestyle podcaster, homesteader, musician, author, marketing maven, and queen of the gray market, Miss Nicole Sauce.
Hello.
How
I
you
thought it
doing,
was just
Nicole?
a caffeinated goat juice dealer.
I like that. I wish I had written that.
I can't take credit for it. I've been accused of it by somebody else.
So what's fun about this is Nick Picone is the one who was like, hey, you should talk to Nicole Sauce. And I was like, yeah, I trust you on everything. Let's do that. And so I reached out to you and I offered you tonight, but I didn't realize that tonight was it today or yesterday that the vaccine passport thing came out?
They've been talking about it for months, but
Right.
It really ramped up the last 2 days.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that it's a worrying thing. And the Libertarian Party of Kentucky got in some trouble for calling it like the Holocaust, which, gained a lot of conversation. That's great. But it's one of those things where, like, when I heard that, I was like, wouldn't it like the nerd in me is like, wouldn't this be better if we talked about it as though it were the Holodomor rather than the Holocaust? Since, there were certain people they didn't like and wouldn't let them move, wouldn't, make sure they made sure they weren't able to shop for food and they died of starvation. Isn't this kind of more what we're looking at this point? But that's just me being a nerd. So I don't know how y'all feel about that.
Going straight for the Nazis, even when that's an adequate comparison, doesn't help any argument as near as I can tell on either side, right? And
I agree with you.
Everybody's a Nazi, nobody's a Nazi.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm coming from. And I also feel like it's one of the lazier things to run into. So
Right.
My thought is, if you're wanting to do a comparison, why not do a comparison with an event that no one talks about? No one really knows about. Why not talk about how bad communism is at the same time? So, I mean, that's just me. But I just thought it was funny with that going on. One of the big things that we talk about a lot on this show is, how to make yourself free in an unfree world. And you doing Living Free in Tennessee and Unloose the Goose and all of that. It's like, this is the perfect person to talk to at this time, because there are a lot of people who don't want to have to deal with what the government's about to do, and we need to find ways to be free kind of around that paradigm. So welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here.
Glad to be here. It should be interesting.
I hope so. But yeah, so like I said, right now, I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are into preparedness or self-sufficiency or homesteading or anything like that. And they think, maybe they'll I've heard someone say to me, it's too late for you to start prepping. And I'm like, is it? And so, like, a question that I would have for you is, one, do you think it's too late to start? And secondly, if you were to start today, for those in our audience, for people who listen to us even a little bit, what would be the first step in your mind to kind of become free in this current era that we're living in?
This is going to sound really flip. Choose to be free. It's a choice you make in everything you do every day. People who are saying it's too late to start prepping, I don't get where that's coming from. It's not like a vaccine passport is going to be shoved federally down our throats in the next 2 weeks. Right? If it is, I'll be really surprised. And if it is, the backlash from that is going to make it so the passport is not shoved down our throats federally.
Right.
So, and if that's the thing that got your attention rather than the shutdowns and scarcity of a year ago, that's great. Start where you are and assess what you have and what your needs are. You look at your own health, your animal's health, your food, your fuel, your finances, medical supplies, and just say, what do I have? What do I need? And then rather than running out and spending $10,000 on MREs or something crazy like Mountain House hiker meals, start building a buffer. Start with a goal of, I'm going to have a week's worth of everything, food, medical supplies, whatever you need. Then when you get to a week, do 2 weeks. And then 3 weeks. If instead of a big crisis, you take one step at a time, you'll learn as you go. And you're less likely to spend a bunch of money on a bunch of crap you'll never use.
Right. Because my first thought is ammo. But we're also in a crisis of that right now.
Well, if you're trying to shoot it with this, then you have a problem. If you don't know how to use the gun, right? If you don't know how to use or defend yourself, it doesn't take a lot to start learning basic situational awareness, to think through what you would do when things happen, and to start getting training. Even if you don't have ammo, you can get an airsoft gun and train with that.
Right.
There's so many things.
Or just dry fire.
Yeah, true. Dry firing totally works.
Yeah. I mean, I've spent my wife keeps saying, why do you keep playing with that thing, Cam? Put it away. And she's not talking about my penis. So just to be clear. But yeah, I mean, that's but that's one of those things. Like I've been kind of putting it around in my mind as to, because I've done some stuff, but I haven't done nearly enough. And so it's just, I've talked to some very good people. When I mention those people, I'm not necessarily meaning the run of the mill or the people that are good that I've talked to. Like, I wouldn't expect you to say that. I wouldn't expect Suzanne Sherman or some of our other friends who've kind of gotten into that world to say any of that. But sometimes it's hard because, you do see doomsday preppers or people who are 10, 15 years down the road of this lifestyle. And you're like, okay, so where do I get started? Do I buy the rain barrels first, or do I buy the food first? Where do I buy toilet paper? Holy crap. We ran out of toilet paper.
Mullein is this leaf that grows almost anywhere in the United States. It works great for that. The funny thing about the toilet paper crisis is I'm like, surely you have a bathtub in your bathroom. And I know that's not your first choice if it happens, and I don't want to run out of toilet paper either, but we wiped our butts before we invented toilet paper somehow.
It's true.
I think Americans discovered the wonders of the bidet for the first time, and that wonderful European technology was brought to our homes.
That's a really good example of it. In every crisis, there's an opportunity to sell something, right?
Right.
Yeah. No toilet paper, can't get bidets.
Well, and like you said, you have to choose to be free, because that's something. I mean, it's very Harry Brown. It's very much what we talk about. Is the you have to choose you have to practice freedom in order to acquire freedom. Is kind of how I've been putting it recently. But it's just, there are a lot of people right now who I think Doomsday Preppers may have been one of the worst TV shows to ever happen for these people.
Yeah. I don't watch shit like that either, so
I've never watched it, but it's crazy how that's the people's first thought is, let me buy military rations. Like, well,
yeah, military rations or hiker rations and ammo and guns. If you don't know how to use your gun, that's not helpful. I would say before that, though, what do you want your life to be like?
Right.
Crazy question, right? But if you're going to build a repository of things and habits that are going to support you towards your freedom, hopefully you've defined what your freedom looks like. Because if you haven't, then you're going to have, a pile of food there and some bandages over there and a whole bunch of dog food with rats in it. And it's not going to empower you.
Right.
And I know that sounds like overly simplistic, but it's really that simple. I don't know.
But yeah, that was another thing.
Discipline to do it. That's the hard part.
Right. Well, that's another.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, about 6 years ago, Atlanta had a similar ice storm to what they just had in Texas. Mm-hmm. And I was a waitress in the middle of downtown. I didn't have anything in my house.
Oh, no.
And we were trapped inside for 5 days. And it got pretty hairy because we were like a bunch of roommates sharing this house. We all ate at the place that we worked. Mm-hmm. So I had my Scarlett O'Hara moment and I was like, this will never happen to me again. And
it's lucky it happened that way.
Right. So we've moved out from the city. It's working for 6 years. And I feel like the only thing I've learned in that 6 years, despite the fact that we've now got rain barrels, I've got working gardens, all of these things that would have seemed like a miracle to me during that time when I was trapped in my house for 5 days, I still feel like all I've learned is that I can't prep enough. And like, it does feel like hopeless sometimes. Like, I know if something really happened, like this wouldn't sustain me. And that I don't have the skills, because I come from the city. I'm a city kid. I've never killed a chicken before, so like, it's daunting. It's very scary. And I think, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Finish.
So I think one of the things that inhibits people from getting started is this idea of like, well, I'll never be able to reach that end goal of complete self-sufficiency. So they never get started. And, it's like, okay, you're not going to be self-sufficient in everything, but you can be self-sufficient in some things. And then you build a community of with people around you who know how to do other things. Like, I don't know how to, maybe hunt and skin something, but I can grow vegetables that somebody who hunts and skins might want. So you can do trade networks and things like that too. So don't feel like you have to have everything sorted out in the first week.
That's a really good point. I don't know anybody who's completely self-sufficient anywhere. And the relationships you build and the trust you build and those, just trading with people, vegetables for chicken or whatever it is a big deal. I have a good scam going. I like to butcher things, but I don't like hunting.
Okay.
I'm willing to hunt. It's going to be like every hunter in the world laughs their ass off watching me out there trying to shoot something, but willing to do it if I have to, but I don't, because the guys who like to hunt don't like to butcher. And so I have this deal going where if they're hunting, I have a fridge outside, they can drop it in the fridge, quartered. I'll butcher it up and I keep some and they get the rest of the meat. And I've never had to shoot a deer.
But I bet they keep you in venison
every winter. Exactly.
Exactly.
Well, let me ask, just for the uninitiated to, your shows, the stuff you've done, what started you on the path of homesteading and self-sufficiency? Was there a moment like Jessica had, or was it just kind of your path throughout life? Like,
it was a little bit of both. I grew up with grandparents who survived the Depression and went through World War II. And they canned food and gardened their whole lives. So that was my model.
Nice.
I then became a city girl and but I always sort of had a tomato plant or two or something going on, right? I like to say I put asparagus patches all over Oregon and never was there long enough to get my asparagus. I just put them in. So but there was also an incident that made me question my personal security. I worked at a think tank in Nashville, and we did a libertarian think tank, and we put a press release out after doing a public records request on Al Gore to see what his energy use was. My name was on that press release. I was the only, like, I was targeted for like my gender, I'm the weak one. And lots of death threats and things of that nature. And nobody ever found me. But then I started thinking, I don't think I'd mind being a little further out from all this density where I can see if somebody's coming.
Yeah.
And I moved to the country with no idea that I was going to end up homesteading. I just moved away for peace. I thought I kept my place in the city. This was supposed to be a weekend getaway, and I ended up here permanently. The next thing you know, it's like one homesteading skill at a time. It's been 14 years. So you're 6 years in, Jessica. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And
yeah, about halfway there.
Yeah. So, that's 6 things you can learn, one thing a year on your homestead. So am I frozen, by the way? Because
you're not, but Jessica is.
Jessica is. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Sometimes it's my rural internet that does that. So I was like, I don't know.
No, it's her rural internet this time.
So I discovered I have a love of processing things. I do love growing, but I really love processing. So I'm looking up at my wall where I have rows of canned goods. I love canning stuff and drying stuff and butchering stuff. And I would have never, ever thought that's what I was going to be into as an adult. But it just zen relaxes me. It makes me feel good about building food stores. And it's something that I can do while listening to podcasts or whatever to just relax. So.
And so let me ask you something, because one of the things that I've been looking into is more or less self-medicine, or at least hooking up with people who can do medical things and creating that part of the community for if something happens. I have several children. And so they like to hurt each other. They like to push each other off of things. And I hate going to the hospital because there's this list of questions that they ask you that are just like, one, none of their damn business. But two, that those people have they have like CPS on speed dial. Not that I'm doing anything legitimately that would ever get CPS called on me, but with the ideologies that are going on right now, it's like, what kind of danger am I putting myself in by going to the hospital? So have you, in your homesteading self-sufficiency path, have you learned how to suture? Have you found someone who does that for you? Like, do you have something that covers that, or do you just have to deal with what I have to deal with?
I know how to sew. I do not know how to suture. That's actually on one of my list of skills that is in the short-term future. I think there are a lot of herbal ways of addressing illness and nutritional ways of preventing illness, and then basic first aid and wound care and infection care that every immediate geographical community should have at least 1 or 2 people who understand those things. Yeah. And pretty much every household should know some of the basics, whatever that is for your area. Like, I want to know how to alleviate pain without having to buy Advil or Tylenol. I want to know how to reduce cold symptoms, all of those things on an herbal side, even if they're quote unquote not as good as what you get over the counter. First, because I want to be gentle to myself and not just nuke it, a symptom every single time. Two, I just think it's healthier. I avoid Western medicine unless I need Western medicine. And when I had pneumonia and was that close to going into the ICU, I took antibiotics. I did. Yeah. But when I have a little sniffle, I'm just going to go to sleep and I'm going to have some tea and let my body deal with it. So I do think it's important, and the suture thing's a sore spot for me. So thanks for bringing that up in front of people who haven't learned it yet.
Well, actually, I recently was on Amazon and they have these practice kits where it's like simulated skin that you can actually like buy the sutures and practice with. And I thought, gosh, my husband slices his hand open all the time. Like maybe this is a skill I need to learn if we're going to move out to the woods. Because
well, they have these bandages too that stick on either side, and you can pull them together. I don't know if you've seen those.
The butterfly bandages.
Yeah. Well, there's another one that I just saw that has some other name. I was like, well, that looks like I don't have to jab somebody with this needle.
I'm so afraid that they're gonna make it impossible to like go to doctors or do anything normal if you don't have, if you don't get the vaccinations that they want you to. They're gonna be like, right now all the Georgia doesn't have like a masking policy, but to go to any doctor's office, you have to wear masks and you have to do all the COVID stuff. Mm-hmm. And, so I'm deathly afraid of like, okay, I'm going to be cut off from medical services, because they're not going to let you into the offices if you haven't gotten the vaccine. That seems like a complete possibility to me. So I'm like, oh shit, I might have to like suture my husband's hand if he slices it off. Like, and that's, a little scary for me.
You might have to anyway, if you're far away.
Right.
That's, I had to learn how to do a tourniquet because I'm far away. And that's the thing. If within your life plan, you decide I do want to move to the country further out, that means a lot of things about hospitals. Like I know people have died that if they would have lived in a city 5 minutes away, that wouldn't have happened. But 25 minutes away is a different story. So that's a good inclination. I would just approach it with levity and not fear. So when we're fear motivated to learn a new skill, it becomes harder to learn it because I have to learn it because there's that pressure. Right. And really, this is a really useful thing. If you have animals, I don't know if you have livestock or anything, but if you have them or you're around them,
spoiled ass dog.
If your spoiled ass dog steps on a piece of glass and severs her tendon right here and is spurting out blood, which has happened to me, knowing what to do for that is super helpful until you can get somebody to help you. I will say, and this is a totally unverified statistic for your show, so don't quote me on this. I was talking to somebody else about this topic today, and he said 50% of medical professionals are declining the Baja Blast, if you will. The speakeasy queasy, as I like to say. And if 50% of your medical staff are declining at this time, I just don't know how fast they make us have it. And I think like in a worst case scenario, you may end up with two systems, the freedom medical system and the not freedom medical system. And if that's the case, where are you going? I mean, I'm already making choices to go to the freedom medical system, right? I go to a cash clinic for most of my stuff. I'm in a health share, so I don't have to pay taxes to the government for not having health coverage. And it's kind of catastrophic. If I have something big happen, it's supposed to kick in. And then I negotiate my payments. And that's all like, there's this radical new idea. Okay, listen, you have to lean in and listen to this one. You can get medical care, and here's what happens. It's called direct care. You pay money for it.
Crazy.
Imagine that. And do they have an easy to access price list for their services?
Yes. That's the whole
thing. Imagine that.
You know what it will cost. Yeah. When we started talking about direct care in the health policy world and giving it this name, I was like, wasn't that the way it used to be? Yeah, shut up, Nicole. It's a new thing. Okay. Fine.
So one of the things that I happened upon the other day was if you go on like the CDC's website to see the leading causes of death, for one, guns don't make the list. Two, there's no COVID on here. So, it goes heart disease, cancer, accidents. But one of the things that I heard, and I need to look it up so that I can actually have the stat, but that if they were honest, that in the second or third slot, I can't remember which, apologies, because I just heard it offhand and this made me think of it, is essentially medical malpractice. It's doctors who did a bad job and killed their patients.
It's
that is much higher on the list than they would ever let you know. And I that's just something that I also find fascinating, that hospitals in and of themselves can be just, my dad died about a year and a half ago, and he was 66 years old and had to have a hip replacement, and he died from it.
Yes.
And it's like my brother blames himself for one reason or another, or my sister, and I'm just like, it was the doctor. It was the anesthesiologist most likely. But here we are acting like he should have died at 66. And so I do hold like a little bit of like, do I really want to listen to these doctors at all? Because I feel like they kill a lot of people.
They do. They save a lot of people too. It's a conundrum. If you think about the way our medical system's set up and how we treat doctors, is it any wonder, and nurses, is it any wonder that mistakes happen?
Right.
Making them do 12 or 2 12-hour back-to-back shifts and stuff like that. And no, I mean, how are you after sleep deprivation? That's what I always think about. It's like, I don't know how they're making any good decisions. And then, of course, there are just people who are incompetent in any field. And they're going based on their understanding of the statistics. So when the recommendation is made, it's a statistical thing. Oh, you need antibiotics because most people need antibiotics in this situation. Well, some people, and you're more likely to get better than if I just let you go out on your own and you eat your crappy diet and whatever. So that happens. So it's kind of like, I think some of those pressures it's set up to make them fail more. And then we further that by how we treat it. And then always bowing to the will of the doctor, right?
Yeah.
That's also a problem. I know my body. You don't know my body. You just saw 20 other patients before me. And you have to kind of be dickish about it, I think. When you're really proactive is probably a nicer word. I was just around a lot of potty mouths right before this, so sorry about that. But
dickish is fine.
Dickish, yeah. But you have to be proactive because I was thinking somebody just went on one of my forums and talked about a tick bite, and she's like, "This is the first time I've ever had a tick bite make my joints ache." And they're like, "Well, somebody said you should probably." She said, "I'm going to go in tomorrow if I still hurt." And somebody said, maybe you should go in now. Maybe your body's telling you something. And that's a time when you might want to see a Western doctor and say, okay, is it Rocky Mountain spotted fever, which can make your liver shut down? Is it, that the infamous and to be dreaded meat allergy tick disease? Like, what is it? Do I need to address this? So I don't know. It's a tough one. Finding a good doctor, though, stick with that doctor.
And that's really the hard part, because we, like with kids, we keep running into like bad doctors or doctors who are dickish to us. It's like, I know what happens to my son when he took this medicine, when he did that. And they're like, no, that's not possible. And I'm like,
possible.
Were you there? Because I might kick you. There's a strong possibility that I kick you right now. But I don't trust them as much as I used to. And there are definitely some good ones out there. There are definitely some that are out in, kind of our subsect of humanity, the free people that I would love to talk to and have good conversations with. But especially right now when, the doctors have essentially been absorbed into the cathedral, and they're being seen as priests, like the news media and all of this have been for a long time. Like, it's harder and harder for me to just blindly go, oh yeah, the doctor knows what he's talking about, because what's he trying to sell me? Like, I was reading something the other day about how I can't remember the number. I didn't know I was going to talk about this, otherwise I'd have it typed up right there. But
I've already thrown out non-verified statistics. So now
but it's like I can't remember the exact time, but antibiotics will kill your gut biome.
It does. Yes.
And it lasts a good long time too.
Yes. Months.
And yeah. And so it's like they have thrown those at me and my kids for years. And I'm like, and then my kid has some behavioral changes. And I'm like, is this because of the antibiotic? Because guts do a lot for how you work, how your brain works, what you think, what you do, how you act. And so it's like, it's harder and harder to trust them. And this isn't just a bash doctors show. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I'm in the middle of, like you said, a conundrum. What exactly do I do when all of the experts are agreeing, except for the ones who've been banned?
Well, they aren't all agreeing. I think if you dig down, you will find. So we see that. I have been on a media diet for. I was on one before, but probably starting around June, I just stopped.
Yeah.
I scan headlines maybe once a day. I was just out of town for a week and didn't look the whole time I was out of town, which means I missed that whole like shipping incident that happened.
Yeah.
That would have been so fun to do memes about. But when you start seeing that and start talking to people in your community, I think you can get different perspectives. And there are a lot of doctors who are more likely to lean towards COVID is bad, get the shot, right? Because the potential negative side effects of the disease, in their opinion, is worse than the potential side effects of the untested vaccination. I said the V word, sorry.
You're good. I just decided to go with it.
Yeah. And then I ask them why. And they'll explain some of these things that can happen. And then I'm looking at other examples of things that every time somebody has a negative reaction to that thing, we do hear about it, right? It's like, boom, especially probably in our networks, we hear about it. So it makes it a lot harder for me to make a decision about what I'm putting in my body, because I can't trust the doctor because they're bought into the system. And I'm having trouble understanding what's really going on with the disease because there's no good statistics. So I've just started everybody I know in the medical field, I call them, if it was you, would you do it and why? Right. And I get different answers, and that's been helpful for me.
I'm sorry. It's good to know that you've actually gotten different answers, because science is not supposed to be just this, we all agree, everything. Settled science. There's no such thing. And anyone who tells you the science is settled is not a scientist, not philosophically, and you should run from that person.
Right.
And especially when the doctor that is the most quoted, lauded, worshipped is the same guy that said you could get AIDS from a doorknob. Like, what are we doing here? Like, are we really going to trust this dude?
I think it depends where you put the doorknob. I just couldn't resist that.
Very true. These are true facts that we're sharing.
I didn't know he was that way, but yeah, I mean, they don't know. I remember when masks did not stop the spread, and now they do, and now 2 masks stop it more, and 3 masks even more. I don't know if 4 masks do, because they haven't gone to the 4th iteration. That's not confusing at all.
I was really heartened when Rand Paul asked Dr. Fauci, where did you get the evidence that 2 masks is effective? And he just said, I know that masks work. And I was like, bam. If this guy hadn't lost credibility with you at that point, you're not listening to him. Well, because he's telling you, and you should, when people tell you who they are, you should listen to them. And he's telling us who he is.
Yeah.
He just knows. Okay.
Cool. Well, the 6 foot thing is also not based in any science. The 6 feet is a random number, apparently, that somebody came up with in some other situation, and it was adopted for this situation.
And that's such a bureaucrat thing to do. Like, just come up with a solution, not because you know it works, but because you should have a solution. And that's it.
Yeah. Although, as an introvert, I really like this 6 foot thing.
Yeah, no. I like that if I do use DoorDash or Uber Eats, I don't have to talk to them. I love that.
That's different here.
Top notch. One of the things that, if Jessica wants to talk about it, because we talked about it last night, but lemon balm.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I think
Sorry.
that she should talk about this because
It's an
it's
impossible
interesting.
plant that does good things. Go ahead.
I am reeling about this. Okay, so somebody on Twitter, I think Abby Normal, I don't know if you guys are familiar with her or not, but she told me about this book right here,
Yeah.
The Herbal Apothecary. And I got it in the mail yesterday and I was reading through it and I landed on the page about lemon balm and it said, lemon balm is an antiviral. It has been shown to be effective against the HIV virus and herpes. And I thought, well, I'm throwing this piece of shit in the trash. And then I went on the internet and thought, I'll just look it up for kicks. And wouldn't you know it? There have been 9 to 10 studies since 2008 up through 2018 where they have shown lemon balm as well as sage or members of the salvia family to have antiviral effects that work against the HIV virus and herpes. And this is coming from PubMed. These are not just the abstracts of these studies, they are the conclusions of these studies. And there's multiple studies. Now, I am not a scientific expert. I've got 3/4 of a biology degree, which enables me just enough to be able to read these studies. But are you kidding me? Shouldn't that be like the finding of the century? That this plant has this, and it's not even, I think it was an aqueous solution of 0.0004% was effective. So not even at cytotoxic levels, which means it kills your healthy cells. Whereas the medications that they do use for this are extremely toxic. And the people who take them suffer from deleterious health effects from the pharmaceutical drugs they're taking. Now, I'm not telling anybody to stop taking their medication and favor lemon balm instead. But isn't it weird that like 9 studies have been done on this, finding similar conclusions? And it's not the finding of the century that lemon balm, which grows wild everywhere. I have to cut it back in my yard. It's like ridiculous how much lemon balm is around here. And it prevents you from getting early stages of HIV infection. Are you kidding me? So yeah, I was trying to explain this to Cam last night, but I was so excited I could barely type.
You explained it really well just now, though.
Thank you. I'm excited. Really, I'm even now really excited about it, and I don't understand why this is not like explosive news that like took the internet by storm. No one seems to know about this. It's all over my yard. Why?
It's not accepted. So you cannot patent that and sell that.
Right.
You can write it in the book
everywhere.
and copyright the book. But if you look at a lot of the things that
Through my book.
Yeah, you threw your book. Don't throw your book.
Sorry, book.
That's why I say learning about the herbal remedies is really cool. I know somebody who had a problem where her daughter couldn't breathe. And they couldn't get to the hospital, but they had some herbs in the backyard. And her husband's like, well, just try some of this tea while we can. And it worked. And from that day forward, she went on to learn all about the different herbs. So your gateway herb is lemon balm, and learn about all these different things that just grow in the yard that can make you healthier. And now she does an herbal tea business. She's figured out how to deal with anxiety with it. She's figured out how to deal with not being able to go to sleep with it. All of these cool things. And lemon balm, it's also, if you rub it on your skin and there's mosquitoes around, they don't like the smell. So
good to know.
It's not a cure-all, end-all, but it's something that you can put on to make the bugs bother you less. It's all sorts of stuff you can do. And it tastes great in tea.
I have a prejudice against herbal and natural medicine because I was a science major, and they and a biology major on top of that in a nursing college. So they pound into your head that this is sort of like junk science. There's no science to back any of this herbal remedy stuff up, and there is laboratory science. Massive amounts of laboratory science that is available if you go to Google Scholarly. It's not, not some of these things you of course have to pay for, but not all of them. A lot of this research is just freely available. And despite what the opinion makers tell you, you can educate yourself enough to read these things. And it's there for you to find, but they're not going to tell you about it. So you have to like go and look, like, and that's the scary part, because if you've been told your entire life, if you do this, you're some kind of charlatan, you're some kind of snake oil salesman, you're a grifter, you're doing something bad. And it's like, no, the grifters are the ones who are keeping this out of people's hands.
I find it interesting that in other countries, that's not the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I lived in Germany, you were just as likely to get an herbal salve for something, for swelling, as you were to get a more pharmaceutical solution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure why that is, but it is different. Their medical complex is different.
The Western medicine paradigm here in the States especially sees the body as these disparate parts. Whereas if you go to like a Chinese medicine doctor, a naturopath, herbal practitioner, Ayurvedic practitioner, they all see the body as a system working together, all the parts. So it's not like you treat just one part of the body. And I think that that's a really interesting way to approach medicine. There are also people at MIT, at Harvard, at Columbia, who are going back into these ancient leech books from the Middle Ages and taking some of the remedies out of these ancient, and they call them leech books because they're from the day when they used to put leeches on you.
Right.
And they find that these medications, that the top anti-malarial prescribed in the world was pulled from an ancient Chinese medicine textbook that was hundreds of years old. And it replaced the malaria drug that they were using before that. And so to suggest that these old ways are somehow replaced by better methods is, I think, hubris on the part of our scientists and our medical practitioners, because we treat them like gods. And that is the part that needs to end. Our devotion, our spiritual devotion to their craft.
I totally agree.
Sorry, rant.
And rant.
Do you think that some of this, with the way our pharmaceutical companies and all of that work and all of the, man-made derived stuff that we're supposed to take, we're supposed to believe is good, do you think, I can't help but feeling, because I've never thought about this before in relation to other countries, but like our IP laws are so much more brutal here than I think anywhere else. I mean, I can't imagine anywhere else is quite as bad as the place where Walt Disney still owns Mickey Mouse. Like, how would that be possible? So do you think that probably plays into it, the IP and patent laws, as to why we run the way we do as compared to Germany?
I don't know the difference between the IP laws between the two countries, but I would say that our IP laws set up a situation to support this with the patenting and all of that, and then the way our government is so susceptible to lobby and special interest. You end up creating these power structures and monopolies over things that should not be monopolized. And then once they're protecting the thing, they protect the thing. The profit motive in Western medicine is for you to be sick so that you have to take a drug for the rest of your life. Something that just ends it is not a good answer, right?
Right.
They want you coming back. That's how they make money.
Yep.
And while I would say the individual doctor, if you talk to them that way, might actually punch you in the nose, and rightly so, the structure is set up that way. So it doesn't matter. It's kind of like individual teachers in government schools really do want to teach kids. The structure is set up in a very unhealthy way for the children.
Yeah.
And
and they're trained to think in those ways without the reasoning behind it.
Right.
So I mean, that makes perfect sense.
I've had doctors prescribe me some things and then tell me, don't take this. Like, I have to prescribe this to you. And when I got that shit home and looked it up, one of the symptoms was permanent, uncontrollable blinking. And I was like, hey, thanks for looking out and telling me not to take this. Like, that's a good doctor. But it's a shame that she had to be like, I have to prescribe this to you. Don't take it. Right.
That's terrible.
Regolin, by the way, y'all, if they're telling you to take Regolin, one of the symptoms of that is permanent, uncontrollable blinking.
That's why you always read the small print when you get the drug home. Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of why one of the common complaints I've heard in the kind of anti-vaxxer crowd is, where is my ingredient list? Where is my side effects list?
Yeah.
Why am I not privy to this? And so, and that's a special case when it comes to how our government runs things, because I don't think that any company is quite as protected as vaccine manufacturers in this country.
No, they get
You're not allowed
regulation. You can't sue them if she was going there. Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's one of the most interesting examples that I've ever heard about lobbying in medicine and in pharmaceuticals was the EpiPen, because they cornered the market and lobbied so hard that so most drugs, like let's say your doctor says, I'm going to write you a prescription for Viagra. You can just write you can write Viagra, but you take it to the pharmacy and you can say, hey, I need this. And they'll go, do you want generic? And you'll say, yes. But EpiPen, they lobbied it so that if a doctor writes down EpiPen on that pad, they cannot give you anything besides EpiPen TM. They can't go generic. They can't go to a different one. And it's like, that is the power of fascism, in a sense, corporatism, if you want to call it that.
Well, the whole thing is fascist. That's people don't realize how fascist we are. And, they complain about the communism that's being put through right now. It's fascism. It's not communism.
Well,
but they're not really different at their core. So whatever.
Right, but that's one of those points that I keep making, is people have misused the word fascism to mean only a very specific thing for so long.
Yeah.
That what was it? Marjorie Taylor Greene the other day called something corporate communism, and I was like, fascism.
There's this word, really efficient.
You just don't know what it means. And that like we talked in another episode to someone where I was like, yeah, communism is bad, but I think that they use communism as a cudgel to get in some of the fascist stuff without people actually seeing it. And of course, I got a bunch of comments of Cam just said, I hate communism, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, it's like, a friend of mine made a really good point, Jack Spirko at the Survival Podcast, about fascism. He said, but if you look at pure communism and fascism side by side, fascism can function for a much longer time without killing a bunch of people. Not that it did in the specific example that everybody's thinking of right now, but in general, if you look at fascist countries, everybody kind of stays comfortable, even though there's more and more control happening. So he's not wrong. Eventually it does go to the extreme, though. It's just a slower march to that extreme where millions of people get killed. Right.
Well, it's like, so, you hear people talk about crony capitalism. It's all just different. It's just dancing around the word fascism. And I'm with you. Let's just call it what it is. Please. Let's just call it like the Great Reset. I heard people call it someone else called it corporate something. I don't know if it was corporate capitalism or corporate communism or whatever words they strung together. And I'm like, that is pure, unadulterated economic fascism. Period.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, I don't know. They're not killing Jews.
Side of the line. What? If they get that done.
Right.
Where does this hubristic attitude come from that none of the horrible things that have ever happened in history can possibly happen here? I see this across so many conversations where you compare something to a historical event and it actually does bear the comparison, and people go, no. They just like push that out of their minds. That could never happen here. I'm like,
we did it wrong that time.
Right. And it's happening right in front of you. You're like gesturing at the thing and you're like, it's there. So I used to wonder, how did these people let these things happen? And now I don't wonder that anymore. It's fucked up that I don't have to wonder anymore because I see my own countrymen doing it, like feet first.
Yeah. And how strong has the propaganda campaign been the last 12 months in your life?
Extreme.
Very interesting how we have been exposed to a bunch of propaganda and it works. Even me,
Yes.
an independent thinker, I wince on my way into the store when I see the mask sign and I don't put my mask on.
Right.
I'm like, they want me to in their store. And I physically, and I make myself go through it because I've thought about it and I don't think I'm going to do that. Right. I've made my choice, but social engineering works and you have to be diligent about challenging your assumptions, even our assumptions on the freedom side. We need to challenge those, I think, all the time. Like, but why? Will that really work? Does that really protect the most poor in our society? And is that complaint valid? And if so, what do we do to fix that? Right. All of those things. Because what we end up doing is one side says one thing and another side says a totally different concern. And this is how we're talking right now. Right.
Right.
We're going to argue about math, but not talk about, the real public health crisis being that we don't take care of ourselves. So our bodies don't fight things off as well in this country as they used to because we're fat.
Right. Did you see that the CDC admitted the other day that 80% of the deaths in hospitals to coronavirus were obese and elderly people with pre-existing conditions? It's like, oh, look, the thing that we all said for the last
we all knew
the last year. But they're finally, that makes me wonder.
And the solution is finally close the gyms and make us stay home.
Right. But it's like, that's my question. If that's how you're talking about it now, if they're kind of giving the anti-crowd that much, what are they going for now? Like, what is that? How does that help them? Is kind of my question, but I don't have an answer for it. It's just, it's out there.
Well,
how does that help them?
They're focused on the more contagious variants. Well, since they're not saying more deadly, then they have to find the other bad thing. So we're going to have this series of variants come through next. And it's all about the variant. Well, those variants were always there.
Yeah.
In other coronaviruses that were coming through our system. They always mutate, right? But
and get weaker.
Like big surprising thing. And it's more contagious. More contagious is good. Usually. If you've looked at how viruses work, a whole bunch of people, they tend to reduce in their head count. Doesn't mean it's 100% going to happen, but I don't know. I'm spouting off at the mouth now. I'm not even drinking my bourbon yet. Jeez.
I'm trying to think of which sexually transmitted disease it was, but I think it's chlamydia. Don't quote me on this, but chlamydia originally inhabited people who were from a tropical region. And these people lived in a very sunny environment and they didn't wear a lot of clothes. So, God, I hope I picked the right disease for this story, but there is a sexually transmitted disease. And so for them, it was only a mild skin irritation. That was because it transferred back and forth between so many people. The most virulent that it ever got was a mild skin irritation that basically everybody got. Well, when Europeans came in, they wore these very heavy woolen clothing that actually prevented the spread. And because of that failure to have skin-to-skin contact in the European types of culture, it grew extremely virulent and started to be passed down through the genitalia. And so it was actually like preventing the spread of this thing that made it more and more and more virulent, and eventually to the point where I think it was one of them, gonorrhea or chlamydia. But and so now we have super gonorrhea, super chlamydia that actually kills people. And it all started out as a simple skin irritation that used to be passed back and forth between people who had lots of skin contact. And so we might be shooting ourselves in the foot sometimes with the idea that not spreading a thing is the best way to handle it.
That's just not even logical to me. Like, that's because so many people have tied herd immunity purely into vaccines.
Right.
So they no longer say that herd immunity is natural. But
they call it natural herd immunity now.
God, they're such nerds. Let me ask, did you say bourbon?
I do like bourbon.
What kind are you drinking?
I'm not drinking any at the moment. What do I have? I have a bottle of 1792 waiting for me. across the room tonight?
Right now, I'm drinking Bullet.
Oh,
Just so you
Bullet's
know
good. Yeah.
Yeah, Bullet. The higher rye, I like.
Mhm.
I like that little bit of spice in it. I have a lot of bourbon though.
Yeah, collection here too.
Yeah. I mean, it's starting to get impressive. But I had to mention that because I think one of the things that I found interesting in kind of reading about different cultures and about traditional cultures that were more trended towards freedom is they all seem to make really good whiskey.
Huh.
Like the Scots, the Irish, the people in the hollers in Kentucky. Like it's an interesting thing that you see the kind of more freedom loving like Southerners, Tennessee whiskey. I mean, these are people that have more of a love for freedom than other people. And I find, and also just all the stories of how Scotch and Irish whiskey and, not so much bourbon, because that's a very American thing, but they kind of got some of their flavor profiles and the choices of how they were distilled and made based on not getting taxed for using a specific ingredient. I find that fascinating. Sorry, my little rant on
No, I mean,
whiskey.
I love whiskeys, of all kinds. I'm going to call them whiskeys. Like I like Scotch, I like bourbon, I like to try the oaked spirit is probably the best way to say it.
It was syphilis.
It was
by the way.
syphilis.
Okay, that
I
makes
looked
sense.
it up.
I can tell she's going to tell me that because I've never heard that before. It was a fascinating story. And like, I want to retell that one now.
The mutation of syphilis, sorry to interrupt you guys, but the mutation of syphilis from a harmless skin infection, which when caught in childhood would inoculate adults from contracting the venereal form of the disease, occurred more viciously in Europe precisely because of the attitudes towards sexual contact, less communal lifestyles, and more clothing and colder climates. These made it harder for the harmless strains to affect the population, destroying herd immunity. So cutting themselves off from each other made the disease worse. And now actually syphilis killed quite a lot of people in Victorian England.
Yeah. So, in a not so pretty way.
Right. Yeah. So yes, that is a true thing. I didn't make that up. I'm not smart enough or creative enough to come up with a story like that.
I didn't think you made it up, but I was sitting here going, this doesn't sound like chlamydia.
Chlamydia is not that bad,
chlamydia.
I understand. But
like most people, that's the fun thing about chlamydia is most men and women don't know that they have it. It stays in their system and doesn't present with sorry for my random chlamydia talk, but here we go. But it doesn't present, especially in women. You will not know unless your pee starts burning. Like that's about it. And so there are some people, right? And so there are some lucky people out there whose partner, it burns when they pee, so they find out they both need to take a pill. But beyond that, I was just like, that's not chlamydia. Chlamydia makes your pee burn.
So yeah, I misspoke about which STD I was talking about. Not
the story stands, and the point was the same.
Right.
Mansplaining STDs.
I thought that was always interesting, and I learned about that back, in the early 2010s. That story, and every time I've learned about like virulent diseases that have cut their way through populations, locking down is something they tried in medieval England during the plagues. And it is said to have caused 10 times the amount of death that was actually necessitated because they would lock the healthy in with the sick.
Yeah, and then the healthy get it.
And then the healthy would get it. So locking in, which is what they did, was considered a terrible travesty and mistake. And I think that if we told them that we were repeating their mistakes, they would be like, what the hell is your problem? Like, we did that. It didn't work. We left the history books for you.
And it's what's been crazy to me about this whole the propaganda, the narrative of coronavirus, COVID, has been the way they talk about it. They act like it's the Spanish flu or the plague, like it's going to kill these millions of people. When in reality, if you look at this thing, this is kind of a bitch ass pandemic. Like it's not doing nearly as much as they thought it would.
Right.
And so like this whole fear thing, like they've had, the propaganda has been strong because they can't stoke it based off of like, because most people don't actually know anyone who's died of coronavirus. I have actually talked to more people who knew suicides from the lockdowns than I've known from people who know anyone. I don't know anyone who died from coronavirus, and most people I have talked to don't know anyone, but I know several people whose family have had suicides, and so it's like it's very clear why they're propagandizing the way that they are.
And I know
Old people-
one
Go
who
ahead.
died from it.
Old people suffer in
hear
isolation
that.
as well. Like
Yeah.
cutting them off from their
Yeah.
families is the number one thing that will cause them to degrade. And so I think that history will look back on this as like, you know, hate to use this overly dramatic term, but like this Holocaust we visited on old people. And not just the pandemic, just the way that we cut them off from society, wrapped them in plastic, and then they slowly expired.
It's the old people who still hug me.
Right.
God bless.
I'm like, you sure you want to do that? Okay, fine. But it is, they're more likely to still interact. When we were locked down, it was the old people who are like, I don't care. I'm old. I might die.
Right.
I might have a heart attack tomorrow, so I'm out. I'm going to be out and about. But you're absolutely right. I have a friend in Atlanta whose dad, I can't remember why he ended up in the hospital in, I think, Pennsylvania. But from the moment he got in the hospital, it was, you know, you can't visit, you're doing the FaceTime thing. And when he went in for his problem, which was just an old person problem, I don't know which illness he had, he did not have coronavirus. At one of his hospital visits, he tested positive for it. And from the moment that happened, every doctor he saw was treating him for complications from coronavirus instead of the underlying health issue. My friend jailbroke him, took him to Atlanta, thinking that had fixed the problem. They finished killing him in Atlanta by treating the underlying, you know, the COVID symptoms or the post-COVID, and not dealing with the underlying situation. And he wrote a really long thing about, you know, if we hadn't been so scared of this and could just treat people for their problem in the hospital, maybe they wouldn't die as much. And I mean, at least they got to be with him. But I'm hearing a lot of stories like that are very alarming, where people who die with COVID die of COVID. And then part of the problem is they're being treated for the COVID and not the thing that's wrong.
Right.
And then that kills them.
And that leaves you in a complication, like we talked about earlier, being far away from hospitals and doctors if you choose to live out in the country. It's like, yeah, you could end up, you know, maybe you have a heart attack or something and you're not close enough to a hospital to make it. But it's like a catch-22. Do I stay in close enough to where I could get to a hospital and then die horribly in a place away from my family, cut off in some sterile environment? Or do I roll that dice and die in my bed? You know, like there's a dignity aspect to this too. Like, how do you want to live your life? What do you want to go out looking at? You know, like, do you want to be surrounded by strangers with their faces covered? And, you know, that's a choice people have to make right now. That's unfortunate, I think. Because they, you know,
I know which one I would make.
Yeah, I know. And I'm not trying to advise anybody. And I'm a young person too, so I'm not up to the plate yet. You know, God willing. But yeah, I imagine living my life, you know, freely and that dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery every time.
Well, I wonder about the passport concept, though. What are we the free people, going to do when somebody like Target says you don't go shopping in our store without our, because that's more likely, I think, to try to be pushed through than some sort of federal ID. Or when we can't get on a plane, what do we do?
So I thought you made an interesting comment earlier that I might tie to this, when you were saying that it will create two different economies, and there will be a freedom of economy for free people and an economy for, and I think that pushes the decentralization aspect organically, because we're going to find ways to do business. We're a great big group of people who don't want to get this vaccine. It's not just a handful of us. It's a great big group of people who don't even necessarily agree with our politics or our ideas about freedom, who are just like suspicious of this vaccine and don't want to get it. There are companies that are going to want their business. And this is like my white pill in this situation is like, I really do think there are going to be like a split off of the economies, and that the people who want to live one way will go this way and the vaccinated people will go the other way. The vaccinated people, y'all can have the cold states. Anywhere it snows, you guys can have those, all of them. You get all the snow states. And then, the South and Texas and, all the warm places, the non-Baja Blast people can set up shop and we'll be happy. We can just amicably divorce. Seems the best way to me.
I agree. And I think so, up to a week ago, anyone who talked about anything coming close to a Baja Blast passport, a vaccine passport, was called a crazy person or conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
And yet, I cannot imagine that there isn't someone who's trying to say, you know what, we can use the RFID inside of a phone so that when you walk through the door of Target, it'll let people know if you're vaccinated or not.
Right.
But it's that's not crazy conspiracy all of a sudden. And so when I first heard it out of the mouth of Joe Biden, I was like, wow, what an opportunity. My first thought wasn't, oh, this is going to be terrible. My first thought was, this is the chance for the agorists, for people who engage in counter economics, for people who want to live free, to show that we can do this and that our prescriptions actually work. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not black pilled enough, but when I see these things, I don't see hopelessness or despair. I see, hey, we can actually show some things, like when the riots were going on,
right?
And there were a lot of shootings and stuff, and people were worried about their neighborhoods and they hated cops. And I was like, this would be the greatest time for people who have training, maybe ex-cops or ex-military libertarians or anarchists or whatever, decide to say, hey, this is my neighborhood. I will offer you for this much money a month to make sure that you're protected. You can call me. I'm 20 seconds away from your house and I'm here to protect you. I see these as little opportunities. And so I'm really hoping that between what you do with your different shows and what we do and what several other people do, that maybe we can start talking these people into taking opportunities. Maybe we can talk about having a network of teleconferencing doctors that we can call when we have an issue, who can write us a prescription so we don't have to go to the hospitals or whatever. There are a lot of wonderful technological and just straight up snail mail, old school ways to take care of things that we should use this time wisely.
And I think it already exists.
Yeah.
You and I don't know it exists, but I know that the Free Market Medical Association exists. And I bet you after this year, they do telemedicine.
Yeah.
And that's where, when we start talking about this more, those comments that you're getting right now, that's where you find things you didn't know exist. I discovered there's somebody working on a Freedom airline.
Really?
Okay. Well, so if we have to get a vaccination to get on a plane, but we don't have to on that airline, guess where my money's going, even if it's 10 or 20 times the ticket cost.
This actually makes me think of something.
My dream.
Several years ago, when Uber came out, what they did is they, what's the word I'm looking for? They went in and they just, it's not disturbed, but they just disrupted the market. They went in, they did their thing, and then they made it almost so that none of these places could say no to them.
Yeah.
There was another service around that same time who was doing it for small aircraft and for planes. And they, instead of disrupting the market, they went and asked permission. They went and tried to do everything as on the book. It's not like Uber did anything necessarily off the books. They just started working. They just said, hey, let's do this. They didn't ask permission. And so that idea of free market planes has been created, but they were too big of sissies to just disrupt the market. And so right now, if there's anyone else with that idea that happens to hear this, disrupt the fucking market.
Yeah.
It's prime.
Damn it.
Yeah, I think
disrupt the market.
I think I was thinking about that company that tried to do it with the air taxi concept. But yeah, I mean, we need to do it with food too, right? The FDA and the USDA are all up our butts as a food producer And the only way we find creative solutions around this is to go in and just start doing things. And the solutions like herd shares and membership cooperatives and those sort of things that have worked, even though they've faced challenge from the FUDs, as Joel Salatin calls them, or the does, that's what he says, the does. It's worked because en masse people are there and they can't fight everybody at once and they give up.
Right.
And there's an argument for why this one's different, right? Well, I'm in a membership
Right.
organization, so I can drink the raw milk or whatever the thing is. If you look at what's being churned out at the policy level in food, it's some of the most infuriating policies that they're looking to get through next. Things like GPS locating, like you like lemon balm. If you want to sell your lemon balm, you have to GPS locate where it was and have that documentation. And then when it goes to somebody, who's a wholesaler, have all of that tracking till it ends up at the grocery store or till it ends up to a direct consumer purchase. That's what they want now. They want to track plants.
Right.
They're already pushing that with animals. And that makes it impossible for the people growing on a smaller scale, using healthier soil practices, producing better vitamins and nutritional levels in the food. It makes it impossible for them to do anything but feed their own family. And even that they try to attack, right? So it's that working around that whenever I see somebody do something cool like what Uber did to the taxi markets or what some of these activist farmers are doing to the food markets, I'm like, right on.
Right.
And
Well, that's the thing is I didn't used to see opportunity in everything. I used to see cynicism and do the sad thing. But I think that right now, like, we have a lot of people who are thinking the same thing, who are thinking, I don't want to do this. I want to be able to buy raw milk that I don't have to tell them that I'm going to be feeding to my dog for some reason.
You live in a dog state?
But that's what a lot of people want. And so I think that really this is an area disrupting the markets, like, I have a 3D printer that outside of me saying it, no one knows I bought.
Everybody knows.
Right. But no, the feds, unless they watch this stream, are not going to know that I have it. They can't look it up. They can't find it. I used crypto. It came straight to my house, and it didn't even have my name on it when it came to my house. So there's not even that. Like, there is no way to track it. And so that's hope. That's optimism. And I think that right now, maybe one of the best things that we can talk about is just find your people.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we need to do. Like, there are people who have different things. Find your freaking people. Find the ones who are able and willing to disrupt a market, or to do it under the table, or to do whatever it takes to get these things happening. I just see endless possibility. I mean, of course I see the shit too, but I see so much possibility right now.
You're right on. Find your people before you need your people.
Right.
That's right.
If you find them now and build trust when you need each other, you have trust. And the more you invest in your community, whether it's your geographical community or just people who are like-minded throughout the world, the more you find more. I did want to mention a resource on that, and have you heard of Freedom Cells?
I've heard of them. I don't know too much about it.
So John Bush, who's on Unloose the Goose with me, he is sort of the founder of this concept of finding your people, and he calls it Freedom Cells. And it's around this idea that a cell of 8 people work well together, and you get 8 of those together, and it gets bigger and bigger. And
sounds like the moon is a harsh mistress.
Yeah, but they have a website, and you can search for stuff, for people in your geographical location. We have a really active community, loosely organized around that in Tennessee. But it's a good way to find people who are thinking these same things, who you maybe could trade a rabbit for some squash or whatever that thing is. But you'll also find people who know how to install solar systems and all sorts of other really cool stuff.
Yeah. So let me back up just a bit, because I there was a question that I had for you about the homesteading thing. and not to derail everything, but when you first got started, were there any humps or obstacles that you didn't expect that were kind of a surprise to you?
All of the humps and obstacles. Was there not one? I don't know. So you go into homesteading and you have this picture in your head. And it's because you've visited under other homesteads and you see them looking so tidy and all these cute animals and the garden growing really well. And then you go to grow your garden for the first year and it totally freaking dies. What I've learned since then is something will fail on me every year. It doesn't matter what it is. And it will be unpredictable. I will have had the best tomato year of my life the year before, and I will get like 3 tomatoes the next year. So I think, excuse me, I told you my cat would do this, right? he's pitching a fit about the closed door. So I think the biggest obstacle was myself, but everything is way harder than it looks. Yeah. It's way harder than it looks. And then your inclination when you get on your homestead for the first time is to start like everything at one time. And then you end up with it's kind of like the island of misfit toys, right? You're the island of unfinished projects. Everywhere. You'll have 20 started things and nothing finished. And so I don't want to be negative about it because that's also part of the learning curve. But if you can avoid doing that and like build your animal infrastructure before you bring the animals to your homestead, for example, you end up a lot better off. And there are a lot of people sharing their homestead stories out there who will say that. The other thing is, it's very easy to put things in the wrong place, especially your first year, because you don't understand your land yet until you've been on it for a while. Right. So I talked to a friend of mine in Ohio who's just moved from the city to his first homestead, and they're getting goats. And I, of course, having had goats on my roof on repeated occasions, said, so what kind of fencing are you using? And he told me, he's like, do you think that'll be enough? I said, no, you need a line of electric wire. He's like, I don't know if I want to do that. I'm going to wait and see. I'm like, So when you decide to put the electric wire, call me and I'll tell you how to do that. Because he's going to have to do what I did. Go through the goats getting out a million times before he embraces that goats jump fences, right? Well, what he's not doing is also a garden. So I said, that's good. You're just doing goats this year.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Right. I was really proud of him for that because I would have tried to do 9 other things. Bees.
What's been the most rewarding aspect, like the thing you've enjoyed learning the best or the best outcome? Because, that's something people would like to know, I'm sure. Yeah. Like what was the most exciting thing that grew grew is a pretty good word, but
having aquaponic system is pretty darn exciting to me because it just grows food. Yeah,
that's nice.
Yeah, so
it's sciencey.
It's sciencey. And so I learned, so very organic, but I've also done hydroponics, which is a really great way to learn how to grow plants. And some people get really mad about it, but I like it. And as a result of that, I also have aquaponics. And the difference, they're both hydroculture. One fertilizes with fish poo and the other with minerals that you buy at the store. That has been super gratifying because I can basically put anything out there and it just does well, right? Yeah. And having spent so many years toiling in the earth, which I still do in addition to the aquaponics, it's been a big surprise. But I'd say the best thing, if I have to choose one, is more the community. Okay. When I first started homesteading, I was by myself out here and didn't know anybody. And over the years, I've gotten to know like other people around me, other people digitally. And those people are the best people. They're just willing to share information, willing to support you, willing to send you seeds, willing to come out and actually people come out and work on my property with me. And I go to their property and I work with them. And I've developed some of the most deep and trusting relationships with other people who have that shared interest out of, any relationships I've had in my life, really.
Wow. That's awesome. And that's not where my brain would have gone. And so I I appreciate that.
Next time I walk on duck poop barefoot, I'm going to have to remember I said that, and it squishes up your toes, which is really gross.
So what? So we do like I'm pretty adamantly anti black pill. That's just so. I mean, Jessica and I, that's kind of our thing. Is we I don't believe that you should ever let or ever cede ground to the enemy. I don't think that you should assume their victory before they've made it. But in order to do that, Malice and others talk about the white pill, and we talk about microdosing the white pill because sometimes it's so small that it's you'll miss it if you're not looking for it. So just to ask you, what is something that would be in that vein for you? Because every time I ask, people think I'm talking about politics or how politics are going to go, but that's not necessarily even what I'm talking about. I'm talking about even in your personal life or things that excite you, things that you see in people, community, etc. But what is a white pill that you think people could take and go, hey, maybe we can win this thing, or at least not lose?
I think the biggest and most stark one for me right now is being in person with each other. I'm doing more events on my land now than I was pre-COVID. In person, we breathe on each other. We eat food together, and we hug each other. And there's no mask mandate here, and that little simple act, which is not normal for a lot of people anymore, but
so bizarre,
is so normal, is something I'm not willing to give up, and I don't think any of us should. We need to get together.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, if you're snotty and gross, don't come over. But if you're sick, don't come. Like that, I call that my don't be a dick rule. Don't be a dick and show up sick and get everybody sick. But that was there before this whole thing happened. If you have the flu, stay home.
Right.
And we can't let them take that.
No.
And they're trying hard. They want us to meet like this all the time. They're even making like remote control sexual devices so you don't have to actually have sex with your partner.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's the thing.
I'm not going there. That's my other white pill. Have sex with your partner.
Have sex.
Actual sex.
Touch the boobies.
Right, exactly.
What was that movie with Sandra Bullock where she tells him it's in the future and she's like, do you want to have sex? Yeah, Demolition Man. She's like, you want to have sex? And he's like, yeah. And then she puts this headset on him. And he like takes it off. He's like, what the hell is this? And she goes, you don't want to exchange fluids, do you? Yes. That's the best. How we do it.
Yeah. That's literally what's kind of being pushed in a lot of ways, is if we have an extreme fear that everybody's germy, we then will no longer be with each other.
Right.
Less babies. Less people will come of this. How many unplanned pregnancies didn't happen because of COVID restrictions?
No,
come on, you guys.
I do want to
sell our kids pot in high school. Come on.
I do want to mention something that's a little bit of a downer, but the sudden and extreme uptick in shootings has been beyond belief. Because over the last year of COVID, you there are no school shootings that you hear of. There's none of this, none of that. And they made a video from one of the kids from the old shootings to kind of so they could talk about banning guns in the election. But all of a sudden, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's just popping off. And so like my brain, like I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's like this is so sudden and there's so much of it that I don't fully trust this. Do you think that that's a crazy thought?
No, I think that's my example of you should be questioning that. And it should not be crazy to question that. The timing is coincidental with discussions of gun control, right?
Right.
And that's really bad for gun control if people are willing to question that. That doesn't mean that it is, but you should question it.
Yeah.
Is it possible? It's possible that is orchestrated.
Well, my joke is always that I'm surprised they don't find more FBI burner phones in these guys' back pockets, because they always talk to them. It always comes out a few days later that the FBI has talked to them and had suspicions on them for a while.
Yeah.
So I'm just like,
But the other part of that, so this is also not outside the realm, and that's part of the fun of thinking it through, is you've just locked people up for a year.
yeah, true.
What did that do
The
to their heads?
mental aspect.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I thought
Lot of
about that
questions.
too. Like you've accelerated people's mental dysfunctions because you isolated them, and that's the same thing with the way that old people deteriorate.
Mhm.
If you've got a psychosis and you're trapped
get
with
better.
yourself trapped with yourself all day, and you don't have like anything from the outside world influencing you, it takes its toll.
Yeah, people who were doing perfectly well have lost everything because of this.
Yep.
And it's very callous, and I hear people say it, well, they're non-essential, so whatever, they can do something else, or
Right.
they can be on unemployment, it's no big deal. I was like, well,
Gotta break a few eggs.
yeah, you broke a lot of eggs, and none
Too
of
many.
them, I mean, a lot of people don't bounce back from that all the way.
Right.
Some people
And
do.
you can't just give people money and think that it's the same as them working or having a job, because
Building
like
something. Yeah.
building something, or even if it's not your dream career or anything like that, you're still interacting with other human beings every day. Like there's all kinds of benefits that come from like forcing you out of your bubble so that you have to go earn.
Mhm.
And especially I think for men that it affects them deeply not to be able to provide. And that's not something that like we talk about the psychology of very often, but like it is, I think it's essential to like the mental stability of men to be able to put in a day's work. Like, and I'm not saying that's not the case for women, but I think it is especially true for men, and men are especially affected by just locking them in their homes and, okay, here's enough money, whatever. That's not a fulfilling life, to be.
And it's not enough money.
And it's not enough
Right.
money. That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the $1,400 check that might eventually show up for me is not enough money to live on.
No.
Right. In theory, that thing's coming. But, what was it? What's the total amount of payout they've given to people that's not unemployment? Maybe $2,000 or something in that range, $2,200.
Yeah, I think
Let's see.
maybe
Unless you have kids.
Right. Was it like
24 months on
$1,200?
$2,000, or 12 months,
Yeah.
$2,000 is not so adequate for
and
people.
they
No.
say insulting things like this will pay your expenses until August. And I'm like, what do you think my expenses are?
Yeah, what are
Like-
your expenses? I want your expenses if that's true.
right.
Do you want me to live in a box? Like, what are you asking for here?
Congress members start at $175,000 a year and
Yeah.
complain that they're not getting paid enough, but somehow $1,400 is supposed to take care of your expenses until August. Like, you guys ever see Arrested Development where he's talking to the mom about shopping? She's like, "It's a banana. What can it cost? $10?" Because she's so rich, she's never been in a grocery store and never had to buy a banana. This
Yeah.
is what this is to me, is, oh, here's your $1,400. That should take care of you, right? You're nothing. You don't cost anything.
Yeah, it's like, and these guys that are making these laws have been getting lobbying dollars and
Yeah.
being paid by the state and writing stupid books that no one reads that they get advances for 30, 40 years. Maybe bananas only cost a penny a piece back then. They don't have any idea. Who are they asking? These are people that are so disconnected from reality and from who they represent that it's stupid. That's all it is. It's stupid.
Well, I think they also don't care. So
Right.
We didn't talk about that earlier. They don't care. They
Right.
don't care if it kills a bunch of people to enact a bunch of policies that they want, that further their control. What they
Right.
want is the power.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in the way, you got to, okay, bye. Right?
And they
A
will
lot of people don't want to believe that, but look at
They
how
don't care. And they what they care about is when those bills came across their tables, or their desks rather, that they could pay their friends and their friends in other countries so that they could get kickbacks off of it. That was it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about Joe Biden promising a $2,000 check and then going, "Oh, well, Trump sent you the first $600 of it." It's like, bitch, you said 2,000. You didn't say me and Trump are working together for this. And
Right.
so it's like they're obviously full of shit, and they're sending money to people who sends them a little something back. They don't care. They want the money. They want the power. I mean, I think that kind of sums up their entire outlook. I think.
Which
I mean,
brings us
that
to
may be cynical,
cryptocurrency.
right?
They did this in toward the end of the Roman Empire too. In order
Yeah.
to curry favor with the populace, they would have these senators just like throwing out gobs of money and buying everybody bread, and it got to be the point where every Roman citizen was entitled to some bread every day, and they called it, that's where the idea of the dole comes from. And
Mhm.
people would line up to get this Roman bread, and if you didn't provide it, you would lose your seat. And so it had nothing to do with whether you were a qualified person. It just, what would you give the people? And we're nearing that point where it's like people don't care what you're going to do, they care what you're going to give them. Gimme, gimme, gimme.
But think about how I have to mention this because the with the bread, there was a guy who lived in those times, and when he had followers that were following him, there were like 5,000 of them, and he just gave them all bread. And it's kind of funny how that's actually counter political, kind of against
The counterculture.
Caesar. I find that
bread.
fascinating.
Then you don't need the
Right.
other bread.
Well,
And
they
then
would
you
have
do what you want.
they would have had to leave to go get their bread.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, stay here. We can feed everybody. Yeah. So interesting. Never thought of that angle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so then that means we need to grow more food as a liberty movement.
Yep. We need to share our bread.
We need to feed people.
Yep. So I have enjoyed talking to you a lot because I think you're a wealth of knowledge, and it's nice to talk to people who don't have the same 19 thoughts as those Twitter accounts with certain initials after their names that aren't just repeating the same nonsense and bullshit day
Mhm.
after day. So I really appreciate you coming on. I've had a good time, and we've gotten deeper than some of the, like what was our last episode? Was it Alex?
I don't remember week to week, dude. Seriously.
It's hard. It's hard to remember any of this stuff.
That was 7 days ago.
I know.
But we do a lot of conversations that go into just the absurd. I love absurdity.
Mhm.
But it's nice to be able to go, hey, let's talk deeply. And you provided that, and it was fulfilling for me. I don't know if it was fulfilling for you though.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on. I had no idea what to expect. I was like, okay, well, we'll just do this. See where it goes. Lemon balm.
That's the theme of our program.
Lemon balm. We're the lemon balm.
No, just that you don't know what you're gonna get. I never know what is gonna happen.
Yeah.
You never know what's gonna come out of my mouth. That's
I did warn him not to freak the guest out.
And I'm like, but I asked permission in advance.
You did, and I'm hard to scare. People try to trip me up a lot for fun.
Before we wrap up and I torture Jessica with this very special video that I have, I know that we can find you on Twitter at Nicole Sauce.
Yes.
I know that if people want to continue listening to you and reading what you've said, you can go to livingfreeintennessee.com. And you can check out Unloose the Goose, where you have just a team of agorists and gray marketers and people who buck the system. And you also have a book, which as soon as I get paid, I'm going to buy, called Cook with What You Have. That's on Amazon. Is there anything else that you want to share with these nerds that listen to us, or give them some hope on the way out?
Well, I'll give them hope on this. So yeah, the best way to connect with me is livingfreeintennessee.com, which gets you to all my other undertakings. But I've been watching, so I watch narratives because I'm into marketing, and I'm watching the stories y'all are telling each other, like we, the agorists, are telling each other. And the last 4 or 5 days, all of a sudden the agorists are anxious. And I think the passport's part of the issue, like watching all of these giant stimulus plans get passed and all of that is scary. And I agree.
Yeah.
But we're agorists, man.
Right.
We understand that we can work around the system.
Yeah.
And in permaculture, the more boundaries you have, the more elegant the design. So the more they push down on us, the more likely it is we are going to find a solution that goes large scale.
Right.
And if you look at cycles, it's a cycle. And unfortunately, you and I are in a cycle where we might make some history as part of it on accident. But I've always said you don't want to be in those like history books, man.
No.
Those
Right.
people do not have fun. But, you know, there is a lot of hope and a lot of opportunity the more these boundaries come down.
Right.
And the key to seeing them is to learn to work through your anxiety and look for those opportunities and find them and go for it. So.
I have yet to come across a compelling reason to not be optimistic. And that's what I appreciate about this conversation, is because you were like, because usually I've had, I had a conversation with a doomer friend of mine the other day, and I was just like, I just don't want to talk to you right now. Like just stop, because you, like, I'm telling you that we have a way out and you're saying we don't. And so I really appreciate the fact that not only are you optimistic naturally, but that when I started talking my optimistic stuff, you're just like, yeah, no, right on. Let's do that. I love that. I appreciate it. Let's fix it. Let's do some things. This is an opportunity, and if we don't take it, we're stupid. But before we hit our wonderful, horrible video that I can't wait to see Jessica's face the entire time as she watches it, I do want to let everyone know where to find us. So we're on Twitter. I'm at Cam Harless. The 12th Century Peasant in the top right-hand corner of the screen is at Soup Canarchist. We have a locals if you want to join us, themadOnes.locals.com. I make t-shirts occasionally. And if you have a good t-shirt idea, Nicole, let me know. I will put it on a shirt and I'll say, this was her. But yeah, so check us out on wearethemadOnes.com, youtube.com/themadOnes. You can also find us on Odyssey if you want to, which is a good service. And I hope the SEC doesn't bring them down. And also check out our other shows on mlganetwork.com. And if you want 10% off your coffee, I hear that Nicole here roasts coffee.
I do. I didn't promo that because I noticed that your show promo is a coffee promo.
Promo it. Do it.
So I roast awesome handcrafted coffee, hollowroast.com. And it's all roasted to order. And I'm very discerning about my beans. So that's basically the pitch there. But I was like, nah, they got a coffee sponsor. I'm staying out.
No, it's good. I am more than willing to have two coffee sponsors or coffee companies go at it and see who comes out on top. I'm fine with that.
It's the knocks of a free market, bitch.
Yeah, you work with the other roasters and we just do package deals.
Hell yeah.
Trying to start a coffee war.
if you'd like would like to get 10% off some premium Italian coffee, go to lorenzati.coffee and at checkout use the promo code TheMadOnes. Beyond that, don't forget that this coming Tuesday we have Iowa ANCAP coming on, followed on Wednesday by Scott Horton. So it's going to be a fun week. And with that, I'm ready to play this video. It's bizarre, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I'm giddy.
He's been excited.
Here we
go. Shay, are you still doing that hand thing? I heard you're doing the hand thing today. God, what is that? Shay, what is it? Hood. You've been doing this for 24/7. So you've been doing the hand thing all day? Heard you were. Jordan told me you had been doing it on a sleeping bag earlier. Hood. God! Shit, I can't stop doing the thing. What is it? God, I heard you're doing the hand thing. could. I could. Shake. My hands are hurting, shake. I could.
Okay. All right. We get it. We get it. What the fuck?
Where do you find these things?
I think a coworker sent it to me like probably 10 years ago, and literally every now and then I still go oi to my wife just to kind of freak her out. So
Hate
Nicole,
it.
thank you for sitting through that with me, that absurdist nonsense that for some reason I appreciate. And
Dada
thank you,
is dead.
Jessica.
Long live Dada.
Thank you for your facial your reactions, Jessica. And with that, you are welcome to come back. We'd love to talk more, and
This
we'll
is
definitely
really
be in
fun,
touch.
Nicole. Thank you.
I'm glad you've
Thank
had
you.
me on. Thank you.
So thank you very much. And to end us off, as always, you freaking dweebs, live the life you want to live the way you want to live it. And if anyone tells you any differently, tell them to go to hell.